Welcome to the NICU Dad Podcast, a podcast for NICU dads by NICU dads. I'm Alex Zavala, a father to two preemie girls, Mia, who was born at 30 weeks, and Emerson, who was born at 27 weeks. Combined, my wife Jen and I both spent over 100 days in the NICU. After my last NICU experience, I started the NICU Dad. I did this to try and fill the gap of information and support that was lacking for NICU dads. Be sure and check out thenicudad.com, and hopefully you will find it a useful resource. In this podcast, we will cover many topics that NICU parents face, but from the NICU dad's perspective. Topics such as premature birth, bereavement, PTSD, and many others. These dads who you'll hear share their stories in hope of letting other NICU dads know they are not alone. We're talking with Henry Medrano, who with his wife Amy had micro-preemie twins, Maddox and Chase. They were born at 23 weeks and weighed 1 pound, 9 ounces, and 2 pounds. They were in the NICU for almost 100 days. Henry is a creative director in Austin, Texas, and along with his boys, is a football and baseball enthusiast.
I want to welcome you all today, and today we have Henry Medrano with us, and he is a NICU dad. I want to thank you for doing this with us today and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It's always interesting to have this discussion and talk about my time in the NICU. In 2005, my wife and I were expecting twins. They were our first set of babies that we were expecting to have. And in the summertime, we sort of found out we were having twin boys. And of course, as obvious, we were as happy as we could possibly be, and did everything we possibly could to have a good and complete successful birth. So much to our surprise, about 3 months out from the due date of our boys, my wife came home one day suddenly and said, "Hey, I feel like something's wrong. I feel like we're going to the bathroom. Not sure what's going on." So, we called the doctor just to be sure. We thought it would be something small and minor. To our surprise, our doctor told us to hurry up and get into the hospital as quick as we could. So we went in that night on a Friday night, and doctor did some evaluations, and one of our boys, who was in a separate amniotic sac, had a lot of fluid that was dispersed, and something had happened to where the fluid was leaking out. So therefore, we were told that my wife's going to go on immediate bed rest, and that we had to be prepared for the boys to come, and that was around 23 weeks. And so at that time, obviously very early in the pregnancy, and was something that obviously terrified myself and terrified my wife. And we went straight to bed rest and took the doctor's orders, and the doctor told us at that time, at that 23-week stage, there was stuff they could do. There was some success rate, but not a lot, not a very high success rate. And the goal was to try to gain as many days, weeks as possible, to keep the boys in my wife as long as possible, to increase the chances of development, lung development, all those things that needed to happen to have a high success rate, having a normal pregnancy. So we go on bed rest. Lasted about 2 weeks. And sure enough, my wife one night, middle of the night, starts feeling feverish, starts feeling bad, and obviously developed an infection, which was we were told by the doctors that would happen at some point. It was just a matter of how long we could fight that off. So that night went into immediate C-section delivery of our two boys. That was around 25 weeks, a little over 25 weeks. Both boys were delivered. One came in weighing at 1 pound, and the other at 1.5 pounds. So obviously, smaller than I could even imagine, even though I was told and prepared. That was pretty devastating to see that, seeing the boys being delivered, and we had maybe a 5-second glimpse of them. They were quickly whisked away taken off, by all the doctors and nurses and taken into the NICU for, testing examinations, while my wife and I were kind of being prepared for what to expect next. So with that, we got to go in and got to the NICU, which was a site, we had never been a part of, something that we never even in our wildest, worst dreams could imagine, and went in, saw our boys, being examined by the doctors, being connected to monitors. It was very, very, very scary time. Lots of monitors, lots of beeping, lots of rushing around. The boys were having to be helped with breathing. They couldn't breathe on their own when they were born and delivered, so therefore needed assistance. And at that time, we didn't know what to think, what to go on. All we could do was kind of bury our heads and pray and pray for the doctors that they would somehow find a way to keep our boys thriving and keep them going and seeing what could be possible. We believe that they, were born for a reason, so we had all the faith in the world that something good had to come out of all of it. So the process started right after that, and we were told we were going to be in for a pretty long stay, and we were obviously hoping and praying for a very long stay, which meant that was going to be a lot of success. So the doctors, with both boys, just kind of went over every possible scenario that could happen, and really just kind of helped us kind of set up milestones for us so we could ease our minds somewhat and focus on the small goals and gains that we were hoping to have and the doctors were hoping to have. Just a crazy time. I always think back to it, and I'm scarred for life, but I can recall every second, every day that we had with them, and just being by their side. The one thing my wife and I said, that no matter what happens, we were going to be there. We were going to be there every second. We were going to be there as much as we possibly could, in hopes that by being around, that that could increase their chances by any means necessary. If there was a possibility, we wanted to be able to provide it. So the boys started their process, and with preemies of that size, the first step was breathing. They were on breathing apparatuses, breathing machines for about a week or two, which was something that we just it was tough to watch, tough to see, but knew it was necessary. And we were very grateful that after a couple of weeks, they both were able to get on, be able to breathe on their own. They did have oxygen. They did have a few things to help them out, but getting them off the breathing tubes was a big goal, and they were able to breathe on their own quicker than we anticipated, which was a big sigh of relief to us. Throughout that time, there was a lot of sleep apnea, a lot of episodes to where blood flow, all these things just had to happen, and as a dad, you just feel defenseless, you feel helpless, you feel, it's just one of the worst feelings ever was to watch your boys, fight for their life. And essentially that's what they were doing, was fighting for their life, with the help of the doctors and nurses. And so it really, it made me sort of focus on trying to learn what was going on, try to learn what the doctors were educating us on, what needed to happen. And so I kind of tried to channel all of my energy and all of my sadness, frustration, anger into trying to figure that out, and just, trying to be that positive influence for my wife to look for all these little goals and gains and successes that would happen throughout our time. So throughout that first couple of weeks, first month, things finally started to somewhat stabilize, as much as you can call it stabilization, to where one of our boys kind of had sort of what the nurses would call normal, a normal sort of normal development, early development for a child that small in the NICU. Our other son, Maddox, didn't have as good of a time and had a lot more complications. And after about a month in the NICU, we weren't seeing a whole lot of progression from him being able to maintain his pulse rates, maintain his breathing, maintain just a lot of his vitals that we were trying to improve upon. And turned out he had a small hole in an artery in his heart that wasn't releasing blood properly. So they tried medication a few times. It would work, not work. Try another dose, work, not work. And then finally the doctor came in, sort of delivered more news that was just almost too much to bear, was that he would have to operate to be able to go in and sort of fix this artery and fix this valve in his heart to hopefully make sure he could have the best chance he could. Mm-hmm. So with that, obviously, was sort of end of the world sort of crisis mode for my wife and I. And we just, we sort of just kind of left it up to God in prayer at that point, that was what he needed, and hopefully that would be the trick that did it. So once they performed the surgery, it took about, a couple of hours where we sort of just, hoped and prayed that everything would go well, and it finally did. Surgery was successful. They finally were able to maintain a lot of those vitals. It was amazing to see how the vitals and the progression sort of take off as soon as that surgery had happened. And so we felt relieved that was going to be a huge step for him, and to sort of get back into this so-called normal mode that our other son, path that he was on. And, so that happened. Then we went on to month 2. Month 2 was kind of much more of the same. We were able to start holding them. We were able to start, my wife was able to start feeding them more and more as they could handle, the sensitivity, and handle being, handling the touching, the skin-to-skin holding that we were able to do with them. That was something that was truly amazing to us, because that was really the first time we were able to kind of hold and really, care for our boys, just like, just take for granted. We always took for granted about the, coming home and holding your baby and passing them around, and that just wasn't reality for us. And, here we were with limited times to hold our kids and limited visitation. And, but we knew it was for the better good of them, to keep them safe and give them that chance that I mentioned earlier. And so, the things kept getting better. The boys started to grow. The boys started to eat more. They started to sleep more. They started to have more of normal patterns. And at this point, the doctors kind of gave us, they used to use the term cautiously optimistic. And that was something that we would hold on to every day, because every day it just, something new and good and different would happen. Now, there were setbacks, obviously. We would get to certain times where we walk in and they'd give us, hey, we had a great day. We made these huge milestones. And then we'd come the next day and they'd say, well, we took 2 steps back or 1 step back. So those days kind of went back and forth till we finally got on a pretty good progression to where the boys were, again, starting to become growers and feeders, as some of the nurses called them, where that was their goal, was to try to get as big as they possibly could and get all the, brain development, lung development, all those things that normal babies would be doing inside the womb are doing outside of the womb. And, it was, at that point, going on to month number 3, it took its toll. As excited as we got, it sort of, became one of those situations where you were just so ready for it to be over and get home and have this normal interaction with our 2 baby boys. And it just seemed like it drug on. But we stayed focused and stayed positive. And after the boys were born on November 5th, the original due date was around Valentine's Day, February 15th. And at that point, we got to February, and we were told, hey, they were getting close to coming home, which was probably the greatest things we could ever hear from a doctor. And at that point, we started to begin the process of getting things ready at home, figuring out what we needed to do, figuring out all the scary things the doctors and nurses were doing for us. We had to figure out how to do all those things because we knew going home there was going to be, still some TLC that we were going to have to give them in terms of, whether it's medication, whether it's monitoring, things of that nature, we had to be prepared for. So finally, February 3rd, I always remember it was Super Bowl Sunday, we were able to take one of our boys home. We wanted to take both of them, but the way things had it, one boy was ready to go home and the other still headed to meet his criteria to get home to us. So the first night was crazy to go home with one of our baby boys and not the other. But we knew he was close. We knew he was close by. We knew he was coming home pretty soon. And that day, we got a call from our doctor and said, hey, how's it going? Wanted to check on things, see how your son was doing. And we said it was great. We were just at home quiet. And he finally said those words we were waiting to hear was, well, I can change that. And why don't you come pick up your other son? So that was, obviously we couldn't wait to get down there, get him back home. And finally we, that night, finally got him back home and we were all back under one roof, or not back under, but together under one roof, which was the greatest day. I mean, 3 long months. Still don't know how we survived it. We still talk about it. We still go back and we don't really go back and discuss all the little things, but we just kind of discussed, like, how did we ever get through that? And we knew that one day with positive thinking and prayer, we knew our boys were destined to come back home with us. And finally, after those 3 months, they were back home.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, you guys had a lot of things going on there. And I kind of want to just touch on it real quick. You had the twins, but they were also micro-preemies. Was there any expectation, or, did you even know what a micro-preemie was when the boys were born?
No, we had no idea. We had zero interaction with a premature baby, period. None of our family, none of our friends. So, the term premature baby was sort of very foreign to us, much less a micro-preemie. But it wasn't until they were delivered that our, the nurses kind of, again, educated us on, micro-preemies versus a preemie. And, because of their weight, that was obviously how they were categorized. And
one of the things that I want to see is if that kind of, for us, we had preemies, and I wanted to know if having a micro-preemie kind of changed your, I guess, outlook with being in the NICU and understanding that you were going to be in there for a long time. I was in denial. I thought preemie would be good after a few weeks. With a micro-preemie, is that a little bit different just because, of their size? And, you can obviously tell the difference between a micro-preemie and a preemie, when you're looking at them.
No, definitely. When we, from the minute they were born and we were told pound and a half, as a father, you're just terrified and you don't know what's going to happen. What does that mean? Are they going to be small? Are they going to be tiny? Are they going to, be small for the rest of their life? They're going to have challenges. And all those things were told to us. And it was terrifying. It was, here you are, you think of babies that you hear that are 6, 7, 8 pounds, and to see your well, in this case, my sons being that small, and when they went home, they were only, around 6 pounds. So, so they probably weren't even as big as a normal full-term baby normally is. So that definitely had us, all kinds of questions, all kinds of worries, all kinds of concerns. And obviously the NICU does a great job, but they also are very real with you. And, there was times that the doctors would talk to us and sit down and say, your sons may never run track, your sons may never play sports, but they can be great people, and do all these other great things. And as a dad, and I'm a sports fan, and I'm a dad, I mean, I was, what dad doesn't, wait for his first day to play catch or watch his son play a game or anything like that. So that, obviously, was a thought that was in my mind, and tough to realize or believe that it could be a possibility. And, thankfully they both play football in middle school. They both play multiple sports, and it just kind of, even as a micro-preemie, it just proved to me just how unbelievable, life is, and how, these boys grew up and caught up so quickly, and caught up to their kids that are at their own age now. And
well, one of the things, I mean, I've really, until you're mentioning it right now, have I really thought about it, but they talk about mothers and what they deal with in this whole NICU experience, and the loss of the normal birth and stuff like that. And I think for dads, I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talk about seeing your child that way, and then having those expectations that you have so much further down the line of playing catch and, the sports and all that. That's part of the process too that NICU dads have to deal with of, is that even going to be an option for you in the future? And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about, that guys actually go through. But you guys you got the boys home now. And what is that like for you with the boys? You have 2 babies out of the NICU with the twins, and for them being micro-preemies when they were born, once you did get them home, what was that experience like?
So once they got home, it was obviously a huge sigh of relief that they were at least home, but it was almost as terrifying, knowing that now we had to become, the nurses. We had to become the ones to monitor. We had to become the ones to facilitate and take care of them. Instead of, laying in bed and putting them down and watching them sleep and, taking a nap with them was far from reality. Reality was, hey, we've got to get these, these vitamins and all these extra things that they're prescribed to take along with their feedings. We've got, both of them came home with breathing monitors. So, that was a not so fun time to just be on edge and wait for that monitor beep to go off. So that was obviously something we had to kind of get used to and realize and figure out how to best deal with that. So in reality, even though they were home, they still weren't, 100% fully developed like other babies would be. So we had to be super cautious about visitors, being, sanitizing, making sure that we didn't bring any germs, outside germs that they can't handle as much as a non-micro-preemie would. And, it was just a busy time. It was kind of a double-edged sword of complete joy and also a bit of just kind of panic and paranoia of making sure we're doing everything right and observing them and making sure, we're not missing anything. Just because of that factor, it's something that, I think parents probably take for granted. And like I said, you just come home and you watch your baby sleep and you play with them. And for us, it was trying to do that, but also trying to be, as careful as we could to make sure that, we didn't have any setbacks or God forbid, end up back in the NICU, which, we had heard stories of before. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. No, you got
I was just going to ask if the boys had any. Obviously, when you're home from the NICU, or there's doctor's visits upon doctor's visits upon doctor's visits. Did you guys have? What was that like for you? Which I'm sure you had, and also too, did the boys have any medical complications from being so small and stuff?
Yeah. So as the boys got, sort of out of the baby stage and started to move towards the toddler stage, we were definitely bombarded with doctor appointments, specialist appointments, development appointments. It seemed like there was something, a couple of days a week we'd be going for just checkups to make sure there's no delays in any kind of motor skills, things like that. We just had to make sure and do a lot of follow-ups. One of our sons, Maddox, who had the surgery, at the time of the surgery, they go through the entire list of complications or things that could happen during the surgery, because they're micro-preemies and, operating on someone who's, 3 or 4 pounds is very hard to do, because everything is so small and compact. So one of the things that was the least of our concerns on the list was the doctor talked about, because everything was so close, that when they went in and clipped that artery closed, there was a chance they could potentially clip a nerve or something like that that controlled the vocal cord. And, of course, they give you the percentages, and it seems like a pretty small percentage, but that actually did happen to Max during the surgery. So as a baby, he was very quiet and didn't cry. He would obviously look like he's crying and screaming, but you could barely hear him. And so that was something we had to monitor very closely, because not only does that control his sound, but it's a big thing for breathing and how much how much he can air and oxygen he can take in and out. So we saw a specialist for a couple of years who first diagnosed that one side of his vocal cords was paralyzed. And so we had to obviously go in a lot, monitor that, go over options. Luckily for us, he continued to grow and get bigger and eat and breathe and not have complications. So we were kind of told we should let him do that and not interfere and intervene unless there was an issue. So we were obviously, happy that, he was able to not have setbacks and complications, but it was very nerve-wracking and kind of what we discussed before. You go back to what does this mean? Does this mean he can't run? Does this mean he won't be able to, play any sports again? So it kind of went all back to that sort of fear factor of, well, what does this mean for him? Is he going to, I think our best hope was that he would just have a raspy voice is what we thought. But there was a lot more to it. So, to this day, he's, like I said, he plays basketball, plays football, plays baseball. And our concern was that he would just be a noisy, raspy voice. Really is kind of all is the side effect that we deal with right now. That was really the only setback or the only complication that we had. Everything else, worked itself out as after they became toddlers and bigger kids.
The boys are how old?
The boys are 13 years old now.
13 years old. So you guys have been out of the NICU for a while. How are they now? Do you see anything? I mean, other than maybe the voice thing, do you see any lingering issues from the NICU?
Aside from the vocal cord issue with one of my sons, the only other thing that that we feel could have been an effect. Our other son sort of had some dyslexia, dysgraphia in school, and so we know that that's something that could have, been because of the delayed development. But, we identified that pretty early on, and, he's been set up in his schools. Thankfully, his schools have been very, very great in dealing with that. And, we were just talking about this today where he made the National Junior Honor Society this year. He was inducted.
Nice.
Both of them were actually inducted. So, he's a fighter. He's been a fighter since day one, and we know he'll fight, kind of through that. But as far as any other issues or lingering effects from the NICU, those are really the things that we kind of deal with and talk about, and we're so thankful that those are the things that we have to deal with, as we know that things could have been a lot worse, and we could have been dealing with a lot more severe issues and complications now. And so with those are the only issues that we deal with, we're just thankful that we were lucky enough to not have any huge complications.
So what about you? 13 years now out of the NICU. I know what it's like for a NICU dad in the NICU. I know what it's like after a year or two. Myself, I'm 5 years out. 13 years out, how are you having any lingering issues from your NICU experience, or, do you see anything there?
I'll always be scarred. I think that's one thing. I think I'll always be scarred, but, it was a lesson that was part of our lives, and something that I was chosen to go through. And, I think it makes me appreciate the boys now. It makes me just so proud to see them, what they accomplish, what they do. It was interesting that you asked that question. I had never been back to the NICU ever since the day they were released. And my wife, we took the boys actually back up there past Easter, a couple months ago, just to sort of pass out some Easter cards and goodwill to all the families that are in the NICU now. And that was the first time I stepped back through those doors, and it definitely brought out a lot of emotion, brought out a lot of memories that I had kind of probably tucked away. My wife would probably tell you I'm pretty good at kind of sometimes hiding emotion and being strong and kind of positive and not really kind of letting those things kind of show. But just being back, it brought back, I just couldn't believe it had been that long. It still feels like it's somewhat yesterday that those moments were still there. So it was just it was one of those things. I'm just so thankful that the NICU exists. I'm thankful for the doctors and nurses that choose to help all the premature babies, mine especially, of course, but all the others that need that help and attention. I think I'll never forget. Oh, well, obviously, I know I'll never forget being in the NICU. I'll try not to remember it all. I'll try to tuck it away, but it's just one of those things where you have to. I had to find a way to be positive, and it's a scary thing, for regardless of how tough, macho, cool, whatever kind of dad you think you are. Nothing will ever prepare you. Nothing will ever tell you how it's really going to be. And everybody's, just like yours, just like mine, our experiences were unique to their own degree. I'm sure we share similar stories of hearing beeps and not wanting to hear those beeps go off, and knowing what's good beeps and knowing a bad beep. So those are just things that will always be a part of our lives, and I was thankful to take the boys back because they had never been in there either. So for them, they had lots of questions. We always talk about it. We always discuss, what they put us through. And we always joke with them about, they've been giving us grief since day one, which is true. But, we welcome the grief now. Looking back now, we're just so glad that they were able to persevere and get through and hope. Now we look back at that time, and as scary as it was and as traumatic as it was, it obviously shaped all of us, shaped our whole family, who we are and how we perceive and how we look at life. So.
Now, aside from this right now, have you ever told that story to anybody or had this discussion about your time in the NICU, or was there anybody that you did talk to when you were in the NICU?
In the NICU, I think during the NICU, no. I think I'm a bottle up kind of guy. So while in the NICU, I think I turned my entire attention to this isn't happening, to we're going to get out of here, to what kind of positive thing can I, how positive can I be for my wife? How positive can I be for our family? So a lot of, telling the story, this is probably the longest I've told the story in detail. I've given obviously I've told the story to close friends, obviously, that we know, and people who have come in contact with our boys. And, so I've shared sort of those snippets and it's still hard. It's still hard to say those things and talk about those things. It took me a while to say, yeah, my kid was 1 pound and my kid was 1.5 pounds. Like you said, as a dad, you want to be you want to be the one like, oh, my kid was 8 pounds, my kid was 9 pounds, but that just wasn't in the cards for us, and I'm okay with that now, because like I said, it just shows me what they're capable of, and overcoming something like that, it just shows what miracles can happen, if you just kind of believe and stay positive.
Yeah. And it the whole bottled up thing, that seems to be the norm for NICU dads. It's, or just dads in general. It's described as being a primal experience that on what we go through once we get put in the NICU, and that switch turns on of survival mode, and you're in there, and it probably never gets turned off. Sometimes it definitely doesn't get turned off when you get home. But that being said, a lot of guys that I talk to, a lot of NICU dads, talk about having like a moment, I guess, when they finally break down. And it seems to be usually once you're at home already, and probably a few weeks at being home. Did you have your breakdown moment?
Yeah, definitely. It's, my wife used to ask me that while we were in the NICU, a little bit afterwards, and she would kind of, say, how'd you stay positive? How did you, she will always, if you would ask her, she'd tell you, you were always right. You were always a step ahead of what was going to happen. And I told her, it was rough, but, the minute I stepped in my car to run home to get her, pajamas or run to get her food, man, I broke down. It was the car. The car was kind of my thing, was where I did my breaking down. That's just kind of that alone moment, stepping, probably just, taking everything, all the emotion that was with me in the hospital. As soon as I would walk out, that's where it would kind of come out, and I would, sort of express it, I guess. And, kind of, again, that's probably another way of me keeping it to myself as well. But that's just kind of was where I did it, and, probably, after a while, after they were home and were better, I say better, just growing and thriving, and things got better, then I kind of would share a little bit more about that, with my wife and my mom. My mom was big there too. I think that was another thing, when my mom would come, and moms always have a good way of bringing out your emotions. So she would always kind of be in there, right there with me as well. While they were home, my wife and I would spend a lot of times too, just kind of thanking our lucky stars of that they were home and we were together and we did it, and it was going to take both of us to withstand that. That's what, people talk about, when things go wrong and there's, turmoil and things are not good, when husband and wife kind of have to, I needed her, she needed me, and we did that to the best we could. She picked me up when I was down and told me it was going to be all right. And I would do that when it was her turn, and we just kind of we would trade off, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes hours of doing that. So,
yeah,
that's just kind of how we dealt with it.
Yeah, it's definitely the whole NICU experience, and even once you come home, definitely marriage and relationship put some strains on them, but also can kind of strengthen it if you do it the right way. That same thing on there too. We're seeing numbers of NICU dads and PTSD. Even postpartum, things like that. Having gone through this experience and knowing what you know now, what advice do you offer for new NICU dads? What are some key things that you would tell yourself, I guess, maybe day one or week one, that you think might have made it even better for you or easier?
I think, there were some instances to where, when things first happened and we got to the NICU, and I remember the first day, one of the nurses came and brought us sort of a book of all kind of past parents, whether it be dads or moms or both, or grandparents, that kind of had like a little keepsake book and would show, hey, here was this preemie or micro-preemie, and here's the day they left, and some of those books were helpful to us. They were like, wow, there is or could be possibly a light at the end of the tunnel, when at the moment when you're being fed that, here's the worst that could happen, because that's what they have to do. It's hard to think that anything good is going to come out of it. But I really wish, I think I did have another dad to talk to, that I could go to and, just kind of vent and ask these questions, because I think as a dad, I think that's kind of a little bit of what dads do, right? Is how do I fix it? And I think that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to fix it. And you can't, or I couldn't. All I could do was fix my knowledge of what was going on and sort of prepare and latch on to the fact that, hey, I got to be ready when they do come home. That's kind of what my little saving grace was, is I immediately went to, okay, I gotta paint the room. I gotta do all this stuff because they're going to come home. But again, it's I think it's that education and of, like I said, for me, was just kind of helping myself learn and educate. Okay, here's what these things mean. Here's what these sounds mean. Here's what the oxygen means. I think as a dad, like I said, you want to fix it. So those are kind of the instructions of what you're going to need later. But I think we went to a couple of sort of parent kind of support groups that they offered in the NICU. Which was nice, and it was good to hear people come and tell their stories. But, more often than not, it was mostly the moms that were kind of doing that stuff. I think at one point, I heard from one dad, and that was huge. That was huge to listen to a dad come in and say, man, guys, I melted down. I cried like a baby. I, did all this stuff. So I felt somewhat normal. I felt like, hey, is it okay to do that? It's okay to feel that way. It's that defenseless feeling is not what you want, but it somewhat helps. It just helped to know that other dads have gone through this, other dads have been through it, and I would tell any dad there's no one way to deal with it. Everyone has their own way, but it's definitely comforting knowing that there are people you can talk to, there's groups you can reach out to, and this was 13 years ago, so I know that there's a lot more being done similar to Hand to Hold, where there's a lot more education around it and awareness around it. But at that time, I think 13 years ago, I feel like it was just growing. So, which is why I, raised my hand, obviously, when I was approached if I would want to do something like this, because I just feel like it's somewhat my duty to try to help someone out, help another dad, whether it's listening to this, whether it's wanting to have a call, pick my brain, or just find someone that I could even just write a note to. I feel like it goes a long way, and would have loved to have had a lot more while I was going through it. But again, there was just enough of it, I think, that helped me out.
No, that's perfect, man. That's awesome. Good advice. 13 years ago, and I think now we're finally opening the door for NICU dad support, and that's why we're doing this. That's why you have the Hand to Hold NICU dad discussions here. But now let's let you brag on those boys. Let's let some of the NICU dads out there and moms hear what it's like for some 23-weekers, some micro-preemies, who are now 13 years old. So what have the boys done? What have they accomplished? Let's let some of these NICU parents who are in it right now kind of see that there's some light at the end of the tunnel.
Sure.
And what are the boys' names too?
My sons are named Maddox and Chase. So it's Maddox Henry Medrano and Chase Henry Medrano. So the boys now are 13, and there is nothing more satisfying than watching them play sports. Obviously, as a dad, I'm a big sports guy, so seeing them take to it is it's a huge part of our lives. My wife has turned into a sports fan by our boys being taking the turn to baseball, football, basketball, whatever the school offers, they try out for it. So one of my sons, Maddox, is a baseball player. He plays travel baseball, and he's taken us places we've never probably thought we would want to go to with his travel baseball. He plays he plays pretty competitive baseball and travels, out of the state. We played in Colorado, we played in Florida, we played in New York, and other places in between. And our other son is football, so he always makes us proud because he was the 1-pounder, and he's the big boy now of the two. He's awesome. Probably outweighs brother by around 20 pounds, 25 pounds. So he's our big bruiser. So we get a kick out of that every day that he was the small one. And they love to go back and forth and argue about who was bigger now versus who was bigger then. So we couldn't be, obviously, again, I think of that day almost every time I take them to practice, take them to a game. I think of the doctor telling us those words. They may never play sports, or they may never run. So it amazes me, and it makes me happy that I have to drive 4 hours a day, taking them to different practices around town. The fact that they can do these things is just awesome. And on the other note, they're both obviously developmental delays was something we were really worried about back in the when they were toddlers and kind of getting into preschool, and now they're straight A students. They both got inducted into the National Honor Society this year as 7th graders. So that was probably goal number one, even over the sports for them. So the fact that they both did it is just amazing to us that, they're able to achieve their grades and play sports, and they also have, I don't know if it's just what we've kind of talked to them about and how lots of people did things for them when they were little, but they've taken to the volunteer things as well. And the school's obviously a big part of that, but they love kind of going out and doing Meals on Wheels. They love volunteering for the church. Like I said, with the NICU thing, they jumped at the chance to be able to go over there and try to spread some good news and success, show that there's success stories, and they were one of them. We just, we pray every day, and we're just so thankful that 13 years ago, when they gave us the biggest scare we could ever get, that we're now in a situation of like I said, normal 13-year-old boys. That's really all we could ask for, was just normal 13-year-old boys at this point.
Oh, man, that's great. That's awesome. That's so good to hear. Well, Henry, I want to thank you for sharing today.
I appreciate it. Again, thank you for having me. Anytime. Happy to help. Like I said, hopefully this reaches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dads down the road, and they're telling their stories 13 years later.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. Once again, please take a look at the NICUDad.com. We continue to grow the list of resources we are bringing NICU dads. To my fellow NICU dads, good luck, and remember, you are not alone.